Part 3, Dragon Lab's story. Here we go. The party had just killed the basilisk, was roasting some meat, had a long rest, and then they kept going to the southeast in this gigantic cavernous chamber. There was this stream flowing to the southeast, which was leading them that way, and then they see the stream end in the pool. It's not as big as the pool that they came from, and as they're looking into the pool, they happen to notice that the inside the water, there's white suddenly appearing, like these tiny little white bubbles just all appearing in a huge mass, and then there's like steam coming up and it's rising out of the water, and they see a dark and orange shape rising up out of the water, and this huge 11-foot tall rock magma elemental golem guy comes striding up out of the water, and he's waving his arms over his head slowly and repeating the words, "Make way, make way. Lord Astor is approaching, make way." And he's doing this for their own safety. He speaks with the party, and can't remember if he says at this point or afterward. Is shortly after the elemental comes up, whose name is Iggy, by the way. Okay. So the party met Igneous, whom they nicknamed Iggy, and, no. So when the party asked for his name, the Earth Elemental Golem character refers to himself as, "I am Igneous." Because he's a little unsure about how to respond when someone asks for his name, because he doesn't really have one. And so they nickname him Iggy. Then something else starts coming out of the water, and it's pretty much the same kind of thing. There's this frothing, except now it's more boiling, and just the water is evaporating and steaming, and this giant red shape comes rising out of the water, and this thing is about 3 times the height of say Kata the Paladin or Eris the Wizard. Many times the height of Spiffy the Gnome or Imp the Goblin, not to mention 5 since I'm listing names. And this dragon is coming out, and he is just breathing fire and melting rock around him. It looks like he kind of swam up, and there's molten lava all around him as he's moving, and the whole cave is gushing with this stuff. And at this point, the heroes are hightailing it out of there. I guess they saw his color and they saw what he was doing, and they were like, well, let's not stick around to find out anything more about this guy. But before they left, they asked Iggy, one of them asked if Iggy would like to join them. It was probably either Eris or Kane, maybe 5. And what a great question to ask any NPC, really. And he responds to them with, "Perhaps later." So they head back up to the chamber they started from, where the pool was, had the stream coming out, the warm pool, and instead of heading back south or east or north, they chose to go west. And to the west, they find another chamber with a path leading up to the north from it, and in this chamber, straight ahead of them to the west, is a cliff, and it's about 30 feet up, and there are a number of fire beetles. I think that's what they're called. Fire beetles that are coming along. They're like the size of a small sheep or kind of a medium or maybe large sized dog, and they're walking along in a little line of them. There's about a half a dozen. Somebody, I think, goes to kill one just for the fun of it, and discovers that they can use their parts of them as torches, because these are kind of like walking fireflies. They glow with an orange glow out of their bellies, something like that. And But as they seem to pretty much ignore the party, and they start crawling up the wall and up to the top of the cliff. So Spiffy, being a gnome druid, casts spider climb on herself, or turns into a spider. I think she turned into a spider and climbed up the cliff to go see what was up there. And she goes through this narrow channel, and at the end of the channel is another chamber, and this one is very circular. It's probably about 60 feet in diameter. In the middle is a roaring fire, and something that few people in life have ever seen, unless you happen to have gone tree planting or worked near also if you went tree planting, you didn't necessarily see this, worked in the forestry industry, where they have a kiln that's burning off waste wood. And this roaring fire is, how do I describe it? It's not even so much that you see fire, it's that you see wind and fire, and it's circling around in this chamber. And there's so much air, it can literally pick things up like a little tornado in this fire chamber. And it's all going, like the heat is all going up the top. It is extremely hot. She can't get much closer at all without starting to suffer damage. And the fire beetles get a little further in, but they're not going right into it. They're just kind of standing around it. And they're just swaying back and forth in a little semicircle arc in front of this fire. And that's all. So Spiffy takes another look around. She can't really see around it because the heat blocks the vision. I guess there is something of fire there to block vision. And so she just turns around and goes back, tells the party what she saw, and they go, okay. And they go up north through some more tunnels. They hear, oh yeah, another set of 6 feet was coming up behind them before they headed north. I can't remember if this basilisk, if they actually killed that one as well, because I believe they gained a level after the first one, and they got a lot more ballsy, which of course is good. And so, at one of the battles, Halia is still around. Don't want to forget about her. Halia, the Dwarven Mining Guild leader, former Miners Guild leader from the town of Fendelver. I don't know if I described her last time, but she's a female dwarf, fairly like stocky, even for a female dwarf, and she wears a red serge coat, and her nose is a bit crooked from somebody who punched her there several times and broke it at least twice. And she's when they try to ask her for advice, she's just like, I don't know, let's just find our way out of here. And she tries to help with giving any information she can about the rocks that she sees, since she's spent enough time in mines and underground, but she doesn't know where the heck they are. So where the heck are they trying to go? And she's mostly pissed off that Daugon pushed her in the water, and that she herself just let herself get into this mess. And during one of these battles with Basilisk, the imp managed to use sleight of hand, snuck up behind her, and on his belly tied her bootlaces together and caused her to fall flat on her face. Nearly got her killed. And she did not forget that. Good times. So they headed up into this tunnel that was ascending upward, and it's winding around and winding further to the west, going uphill. They smell more gas, but they can't see any other way around it. And so Eris decides to fire a firebolt into the gas, and it makes this huge eruption. And luckily, he also cast something to protect them, but they didn't take very much damage from it, if at all, because they were standing very far back and were smart about what they were doing. And it was a flammable gas. Happens underground sometimes. Pockets of it. So they head west and find themselves in another crossroads. Part 2 of Chapter 3. The Inferno was there because, as Matt Colville recently said, take the stuff that you like and put it in your game. I was once tree planting, and they had this gigantic kiln that was there to just burn excess wood at this lumber yard that we would deliver empty boxes to. Trees that we would plant would be delivered in these hefty cardboard boxes, and and we would stack them all together, and like we'd flatten them and stick them inside of one box. Flatten a bunch of them, stick them in one, so that we had a heavy bunch of cardboard, and we'd have to get rid of these things, and so they were just burnt in this gigantic kiln thing, and it was literally like I described it, and I could not believe when I saw it that this kind of thing could just exist, and it could be like man-made. Somebody would literally open the door from the outside. It was all outdoors around it, and yeah, they would open the door and like reach over to the handle, swing it open, and stand back out of the way because the blast of heat coming out of the doorway was so intensely strong. If you were standing right in front of it, you'd probably instantly lose your eyebrows or something. And then we would stand basically as far back as we could and just throw the boxes through the door so that we didn't have to get close to the door. And the really, really fun thing was that if you threw it high enough that it didn't just kind of get barely in the doorway, that it got into the kiln, and the wind inside would actually carry it. It would pick it up and would never touch the ground. They would burst into flames, circling around this gigantic inferno and disappear into nothing. Yeah, so I wanted to describe something of that to my players because it was one of the most incredible things I guess I'd seen in my small life. And the fact that the fire beetles were there and kind of led Spiffy there and just did their dance around that was all improvised. I have a couple of random charts that I had made in advance. I was really glad I made these. They came in super handy. They took a lot of work, so I put a lot of thought into them. And one of them was for creature encounters, and one of them was for like just terrain event encounter type things. So the gas that they smelt in two different locations, that was just rolled up on the random encounters, and you could have either no creatures and some terrain, or terrain and some creatures with no terrain, or a combination of both. And I liked the way that worked, because a lot of time there'd kind of be nothing, a lot of time there'd be something, and I would be rolling like all the time. And it just kind of populated interesting stuff throughout my map because I didn't have a lot of events planned in the map aside from a couple of key points, and so it worked well. And I rolled up some fire beetles, and I was like, okay, what are they going to do? They're not going to attack the players. They're just going to walk over to the closest source of fire because they like fire. I don't think they can climb walls necessarily, but in my world at that point anyway, these ones could. Meeting Astur, the Dragon Lord of the realm, and his servant Igneous. I had written an entire side story that if they continued southwest down that ramp, they would have eventually encountered his domain, and I could tell they weren't going to go that way. So I just figured it would be cool if they saw him doing his thing, which is directing magma in the core of the world. They're in the core of the world, by the way. That the heat of the planet needs to be maintained. If the heat, if the magma and the fire in the planet gets too cold, then it will be too cold to sustain life, and everything will die off. And if it gets too hot and things get too out of control, if there's magma going in the wrong directions, then you have too much eruptions on the surface, and that could also wipe out life. And so he has a very, very important job of controlling the fire of the world, the heat of the world. He's like, the heat is life in this place, and he is basically in charge of, he is the lord of this aspect of life. And so that's what he's doing. I thought it'd be cool. I really loved introducing him that way, and I thought it was hilarious that they ran off. If they hadn't, he would have talked to them, or they would have talked to him. Although, I forgot to mention, story point, when Igneous saw them, he wasn't speaking their language. And when he saw that they were speaking something else, he regurgitated a stone out of his mouth. And so he's made out of stones, right? So a stone from inside him comes out, looks like a blue sapphire in his hand, and he takes it and he says an incantation and goes like this. And then he can speak their language, and they can understand him, and he can understand them. And that's when they had a small conversation, And so he would have translated for Aster if they had talked with Aster. And Aster is very interested in newcomers to his realm, and my whole shtick with him meeting them, or either going to his den or in this encounter, that he would have basically wanted to forcibly take them back to his place and make them, permanent forced guests, as it were. And they would have to figure out a way to escape. But we never went that way, so maybe I'll just use those story ideas for that another time, because that's what good DMs do, is recycle stuff that doesn't get used, because you gotta expect that not everything's gonna get used by far. Okay, don't stop. This is our quest. It's a lot of wandering, a lot of trying to find their way through underground. Um,